Good evening. I thought I'd like to talk to you alone for a few minutes tonight about our plans for the future of Britain. I know there are some people who are saying that this is a dull election. Well, I haven't found it dull. And anyway, I don't think slanging matches help us very much. I think even that there's perhaps another explanation, an explanation which I found rather well expressed in a socialist weekly, The New Statesman, yesterday. I've got the quotation here. It wrote, "Labour voters are not easily roused when the country is, generally speaking, prosperous." Well, of course, that's true. The country is prosperous, and we all know it and rejoice at it. Well, now as to our plans. They fall into several phases. One, let's start with housing. You remember we undertook to build 300,000 houses. Under Sir Winston Churchill's administration, we've done that. And so now we can move on to tackle the next problem, the slums. I suppose there's no issue which in human misery, even suffering, at home involves a more acute problem than this one of the slum. Well, now we've told you what we mean to do. We will clear 200,000 people every year out of the slums into decent housing conditions, just as we built the 300,000 houses we promised to build. And then take hospitals. There's been practically no building of new hospitals since the war. Now our plans are ready. We're prepared to go ahead. And by the end of the year, some results should begin to appear. And then there's education. Education so important in itself, and so important also in this new industrial age into which we're moving. I'm not satisfied with what we've been able to do for education so far, though we've done quite a lot. We have in fact built twice as many schools in 3 years as our socialist predecessors did in 6. But I know that's not enough. And so we've prepared a 5-year plan under which we propose to provide 1 million new places in the school. And then alongside that, at the same time, we are going to develop the other stages of education so that industry and all branches of our national life can find openings for our young people, young men and young women, which are so desirable for them and for the country. You know, I don't think we can ever, in Britain, in mass production, in quantity, equal what the giant states like the United States or Soviet Russia can produce. But we can hold our own, and more than hold our own, in quality. And that is what we must do. And that's why these new educational plans are so very important. Since we've been in power, we have set aside increasing sums for the social services. We've increased the amounts payable in old age pensions, for instance, and in national assistance. We've done that so that the sums originally voted as long ago as 1946 may have the same purchasing power, and actually, in the case of old age pension, rather more purchasing power than they had in 1946. But the trouble has been that since 1946, the pound has steadily decreased in value, so the pensioner found his payment worth less and less, until we put that right a short time ago. But if the socialist plans are carried into effect, plans they now advocate, which must result in increased expenditure, and consequently in a further rise and sharper rise in prices, costs, well then again we shall be facing the same difficulty of the falling value of the pound, which at any rate even our worst critics will admit that we have checked. Now, in that connection, I'd like to take another measure of the national prosperity today and how we're getting on. And that's saving. You know, it's a remarkable fact, but savings this year were 6 times what they were last year, and many times what they were under the socialists. And by that I don't mean the savings of the companies and industry and so on. I mean private savings, individual savings of the smaller income groups, national savings certificates, and so on. Now, I think there must be some explanation for that. I'm sure there is. And I suggest you 2 reasons. The first, because national prosperity is up, therefore it's more possible for people to save. And the second, that there's more confidence in the future purchasing power of money, so that people are willing to save, feeling sure that the money will buy something like what they hope for when the time to cash the savings certificate comes. Now that's very important, not only in itself, but for the opportunity it gives us to do other tasks which face us. We have big new schemes for roads and for railways. Roads, quite imperative, if only on account of safety. The casualties are far too high. And the railways. We want to see them electrified. We want them to have diesel engines and so forth. All that requires capital. Those are 2 projects which can go forward with all the more confidence if our financial position is sound. And then there's another very important sphere where if our savings are accumulating, we shall be able to do, as we ought to be doing, more than we're doing today. And that's the colonies, our colonial empire. Now, if we can save enough to invest more in those territories, we shall do 2 things at once. We shall increase the prosperity of those colonies, raise the standard of life, which we want to do, must do. And at the same time, as they become more prosperous, we shall create new markets for our goods, for our manufactured articles which we want to sell to them. So that's a 2-way traffic. You know, as these colonies grow up in the political sense, they're going to have some difficulties. It's quite inevitable. Democracy, we understand it here very well, but it's still the most difficult form of government in the world. And as they have their growing pains, so we must try to help them, lead them, guide them, so that at the end of the road we enjoy both their confidence and their respect, and we are all partners in the same Commonwealth. That's what we want to work for, and if we can get it. The future is almost unlimited. Now I've given you some kind of picture of what kind of future we want to create. But I haven't mentioned what's perhaps the most important development of all, the new industries. That's where the most exciting changes are taking place while you and I are talking here tonight. I'm told, for instance, that out of a ball of plutonium, not much larger than a football, we expect to be able to generate electricity. And there are all sorts of other new movements taking place, new developments, like in Cumberland, where we expect, I think by the end of next year, to generate electricity from nuclear energy. These and other developments can be of decisive importance for the future of this country of ours. Now, as we go ahead with this work, we are going to use both the efforts of the state and the energy and adaptability of private enterprise. They've got to go together, the two of them. We are not going to be diverted on ideological prejudice in favor of one or the other. We're going to use both. We've got to marry them in the interest of the country as a whole. And surely that's more sensible than trying at this stage to go in for more nationalization, as our socialists want to do. Why in the world suggest renationalizing steel when their results are so brilliant as they are today? Surely that's utter folly. Well, now those are the schemes that we have in mind. And I say to you emphatically this, that there is no limit to what we can achieve for the prosperity of our people and the future of our country if we go about it in the right way. But of course, there are dangers. We must make up our mind that our object is to create new wealth and to share out that new wealth as widely as we can among all sections of the people, rather than to squabble about how to divide what remains of the old wealth. And there's another danger. I think we've all been troubled in the last few weeks by these industrial disputes. And of course they have had certain special features which have made them difficult to handle. And many of them are disputes between unions, or even disputes within a union. I know that the TUC has been and is doing everything in its power to try and bring about a settlement. And the government will do what it can too. But of course these matters are of national importance. And it's for that reason that I thought it my duty last night to ask the representatives of the TUC to come to see me at Downing Street so that we could talk the situation over together. Well, now, all these issues which I have explained to you tonight, important as they are in our different spheres, are dominated by one, which is the greatest of all. Can we maintain peace? Peace. About a year ago, at this time, exactly a year ago, I was at Geneva. And I was a very worried man, because it didn't seem to me that that conference was going to work out all right. And if it didn't, I feared that the Indo-China dispute, a local matter in itself, would spread into a much wider conflict which might engulf us all. Well, happily, that didn't happen. And looking back on it, though I didn't think so at the time, it may well be that Geneva was a turning point. Because even in the Far East, since then, though the situation is still dangerous, it's not quite so acute as it was then. And in other areas, for instance in the Middle East, we've been able to reach some quite important agreements within the last year. Persia, where oil arrangements, very important to us, have been completed, where contracts are now being given both for road and rail, important for British industry again. Egypt, Trieste, as the outcome of which some garrisons can be brought home. And then finally, most important of all, Europe. Last August, when the French Assembly threw out the European Defence Community, things looked pretty dark in Europe. Because we hadn't then any agreed plan for Western unity on which we could base ourselves. And that's why, with Sir Winston Churchill's strong approval, I decided to fly around to the capitals of Western Europe with some ideas of my own to see whether upon the basis of these we could find agreement, arrange a meeting in London. Well, we did get agreement. We did meet in London. We did finally sign up in Paris what are now called the Paris Agreement. As a result of that, Western European Union has come into being, and I trust and believe the hatchet is finally buried between France and Germany. Well now, it's the agreement by all countries on these Paris Accords which has made it possible for us now to go forward and suggest conversations with Soviet Russia. We're ready for those talks, and I hope that they will take place in a few weeks' time. And I've only one comment to make in general about these discussions. I would have been anxious if talks at the highest level had taken place in such conditions that if they'd failed, the international situation would have become more tense instead of less tense. Now, there's absolutely no danger of that. An admirable program of work has been agreed between the powers concerned, and I hope will shortly be generally accepted. As a result of that, there will be meetings at every level, and I am absolutely convinced that a meeting now, within the next 2 or 3 months, at the highest level, could be an excellent send-off for the program of work that lies ahead of us, and which will probably take several months. These things are not going to be settled quickly. For my part, I will be very ready for another meeting at the highest level later on, if that was thought useful. So now, what are the hopes? It's very hard to say. In foreign affairs, it's always hard to say. And yet, I do sincerely believe there are opportunities today greater than any we have known since the war. It's up to us, all of us, to seize them. At least we shall be round the table and can discuss, I hope, informally, the problems that shadow our own time. The hydrogen bomb, disarmament problem, future of Germany. All these questions can be discussed, and maybe plans can be worked out which will help us to remove them all from the sphere of danger for mankind. At any rate, we can try, and that's an opportunity which we ought to count ourselves blessed to command. Now then, so finally, my friends, we are moving into the closing stages of this campaign. I've given you some account of our plans at home and our projects abroad. It's for you to decide. If you think on the basis of what we have done that we deserve your confidence, then I ask you to give it emphatically by vote on Thursday next. It lies in your power to decide the future history of this country, and maybe of the world, for a generation. I am sure that you will decide it right. I ask you to decide your vote, and as you do so, to determine that you will serve thereby your country and peace of the world. Good night.